The wind always knew my name before anyone else did. It whispered it through the dry grass, curled it into the hollow spaces of the barn, and carried it across the valley long before I ever found the courage to say it out loud. My name is Alara Quinn, and for a long time, I thought silence was safer than truth. When people ask where I came from, I usually say, nowhere. It's easier that way. Easier than explaining the half-broken childhood, the noise of arguments that could shatter glass, the way love sometimes felt like a currency I couldn't afford. So when I bought this piece of land, 40 acres of overgrown pasture, and a barn that leaned like it had secrets, I wasn't chasing peace. I was chasing disappearance. It was supposed to be empty here, just me, the wind, and the sound of my own healing. But then I heard him. It was the second night after the move. The rain had fallen in slow sheets, heavy and rhythmic, a kind of heartbeat against the tin roof. I couldn't sleep. Insomnia had been my oldest companion. So I wrapped myself in a blanket and stepped out to the porch. That's when I saw him through the mist. A shape, massive and ghost-like, standing by the fence line. A horse. He was wild. Or at least he looked it. Dark coat, long mane tangled with twigs and burrs, eyes like black glass that caught the moonlight and didn't let it go. He didn't move when I called out, didn't flinch when thunder rolled. He just looked at me. And in that strange, wordless moment, something inside my chest, something I thought had died years ago, stirred. I whispered, "Hey there," though my voice trembled. He flicked an ear but didn't run. The air between us held its breath. That's how it began. The next morning, I found hoofprints by the creek and a few strands of black mane tangled in the fence wire. I should have called animal control, maybe tried to find out if someone nearby had lost a horse, but the truth is I didn't want to. For the first time in months, I felt curious. That afternoon, I brought out a handful of old apples from the fridge and walked toward the fence. My boots sank into the mud, and the air smelled of wet earth and cedar. The world felt quieter out here, like it was listening. He appeared again, cautious but calm, head lifting as if he'd been waiting for me. "I don't know who you belong to," I murmured, extending my hand, "but you can stay if you want." He stepped closer, nostrils flaring, breath hot against my fingers. His coat shimmered with the remnants of rain, muscles twitching under the skin. When his muzzle brushed the apple, I swear the world tilted. That touch, gentle, uncertain, felt like forgiveness. I hadn't realized how much I needed that. In the days that followed, I saw him more often. Sometimes at dawn, watching from the hill like a sentinel. Other times at dusk, when the horizon burned orange and gold. I started calling him Ash, because he reminded me of something burned down, but still beautiful. Ash never let me close enough to touch again. Not yet. But he listened. When I talked, about the things I couldn't tell anyone else, he stood still, head slightly turned, like he understood every word. "You know," I said one night, sitting on the fence rail, "I left a whole life behind for this. A city, a career, a version of myself I couldn't stand anymore. Everyone told me I was running away." I smiled faintly. Maybe they were right. The stars didn't answer, but Ash lifted his head, ears twitching toward me. "Maybe you ran too," I whispered, and maybe that was why we found each other. It wasn't all poetry and quiet moments. One afternoon, while repairing the fence, I misjudged the tension on the wire. It snapped back, slicing across my palm. The sting was sharp, the blood bright and shocking against the pale sky. I sat down hard in the grass, cursing through clenched teeth. Before I could stand, I heard hooves thundering. Ash galloped toward me, mane flying, eyes wide. For a heartbeat, fear stabbed through me. He was massive, powerful, unpredictable. But instead of running past, he stopped just feet away, snorting, pawing the ground. "It's okay," I said, holding up my bleeding hand. "I'm fine," he didn't move. He watched, trembling slightly, until I pressed a rag against the wound. Then, as if satisfied, he stepped back, lowering his head. That night, When the adrenaline wore off, I cried. Not from the pain, but from something else. The realization that for the first time in years, someone, even a horse, came running when I was hurt. The next morning, fog rolled over the pasture like spilled milk. I made coffee, stood barefoot on the porch, and felt the first hint of belonging settle in my chest. It was strange. How quickly a place and a creature could start to feel like home. When Ash appeared at the fence again, I didn't hesitate. I walked toward him slowly, whispering nonsense, hands open and visible. He didn't shy away. When I reached him, I lifted my hand to his neck. Warmth. Muscle. Life. He stood still. I could feel the tremor of his heartbeat under my fingertips, and something inside me mirrored it. A fragile rhythm. Rediscovered. You're not just a horse, are you? I breathed. He blinked, long lashes catching the light. Maybe it was imagination, or maybe something more. But in his stillness, I felt a kind of answer. That's when I heard the click of a camera. The sound froze me. I turned sharply, but there was no one there. Just the whispering grass, the breath of wind, the echo of that single invasive sound. Someone had taken a photo of us. I searched the tree line, my pulse racing. The land was supposed to be private, remote, but there, by the fence post, was a glint of something metallic. A small wildlife camera, half hidden by leaves. I pulled it down, hands shaking. A red light blinked. Recording. Caught doing something good feeling, a voice in my head mocked, the phrase that would soon take on a strange, ironic truth. Who had set this up? And why did it feel like the story, my story, had just been seen by someone else before I was ready to tell it? That night I couldn't sleep again. The memory of that clicking sound replayed in my head, over and over. I sat by the barn, leaning against the rough wood, listening to Ash breathe in his stall. His calmness was the only thing keeping me tethered. I came here to be invisible, I whispered into the dark. Not to be watched, Ash snorted softly, shifting his weight, and the smell of hay and earth grounded me. The camera sat beside me on the floor. Quiet now, but heavy with unspoken questions. Outside, the wind rose again, whispering through the valley, carrying my name like a secret it refused to keep. And for the first time, I wondered if disappearing was ever truly possible, or if the world always finds a way to catch you just when you start doing something good. By the time the sun climbed above the ridge, I'd already been awake for hours. Sleep had dissolved into a shallow drift. Every time I closed my eyes, that click echoed through the darkness sharp as a pin. The memory of the camera sat heavy in my chest, like a secret I wasn't sure I wanted to keep. The world outside was too still. Even the wind seemed cautious, as though it too knew we were being watched. I found Ash standing near the fence again, head lowered, chewing lazily on a patch of frosted grass. His calmness should have comforted me, but instead, it made the air feel even stranger, like he knew something I didn't. Morning, boy, I called softly. His ears flicked toward me. I walked closer, the cold biting my skin, the camera, now switched off, tucked in the pocket of my coat. I didn't know why I'd kept it. Maybe because throwing it away would have felt like pretending it never happened. Did you see anyone out here? I asked him. Anyone but me? He huffed, breath clouding in the air. Right. Silly question. Still, as his dark eyes met mine, a chill passed through me that had nothing to do with the weather. I spent the morning combing the property. The land stretched far beyond the house, open fields bleeding into dense woods. The trees were tall, knotted, their bark silvered by age. I followed the fence line, my boots crunching on frosted leaves, scanning for any sign that someone had been here recently. Half an hour in, I found a trail, faint footprints pressed into the mud, leading away from the fence and disappearing into the woods. My pulse quickened. The prints weren't mine. They were too large, too heavy. I followed them. The forest swallowed sound quickly. The deeper I went, the softer everything became. Birds went quiet. Even my breath seemed to fall flat. After a few minutes, I reached a clearing I didn't recognize. And there, nailed to a tree, was another camera. This one was newer, sleeker, pointing directly toward the pasture. I stared at it for a long moment, my stomach twisting. Someone had been watching me. Or maybe watching us. I took the camera down, careful not to smudge the lens. A faint red light still blinked inside. It was recording. 1,000 possibilities ran through my mind. Local kids playing pranks, a hunter monitoring the land, maybe a previous owner. But none of those explanations fit the knot forming in my gut. This didn't feel random. The placement was too deliberate. Someone wanted to see what happened here. When I returned to the barn, Ash was restless. He paced his stall, ears pinned slightly back. "Hey," I said softly. "Easy." He stopped, turning his head toward me. The whites of his eyes caught the dim light, and for a second, I thought I saw fear there. Not wild or animalistic, but knowing. I set both cameras on the workbench. Their little black lenses faced me like unblinking eyes. "Someone's watching us," I whispered. "But why?" Ash shifted again, tail flicking. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at those silent devices. Then impulsively, I said, "Let's find out." By afternoon, I had my laptop out, cables running like veins across the wooden counter. It took some tinkering. The first camera's memory card was easy enough to remove, but the second was encrypted. Still, I managed to get the first one open. The footage started with static, then a wide view of the pasture. Hours passed in fast forward. Wind through the grass, birds flitting by, sunlight fading and returning. Then, movement. Me. Standing by the fence, hand outstretched toward Ash. I watched the moment he let me touch him. The screen flickered, the light soft, almost ethereal. And then, a pause. Someone zoomed in. The frame tightened around my face, then around the horses. Sound, faint but unmistakable, and a breath or a laugh, came from behind the camera. My heart thudded. This wasn't a wildlife camera. It wasn't set up by accident. Someone had been there. I shut the laptop hard, breath coming fast. The barn felt smaller now, the shadows too thick. "Okay," I said out loud, forcing calm. "Okay, think." It could still be innocent, I told myself. A hiker, a neighbor, someone curious about the property. But deep down I knew that wasn't true. Whoever it was had been close enough to hear. Ash nickered softly, breaking my spiral. I walked to him, pressing my forehead against his neck. The warmth of his body steadied me. "You and me," I whispered. "That's all this is supposed to be. No one else." He breathed out slowly, and I felt his chest rise and fall against mine. That night, I locked every door and window. The cameras sat on the kitchen table, their blinking lights finally dark. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat there, staring out into the dark pasture, waiting for something, or someone, to move. Around midnight, it started to rain again. The sound on the roof was steady, hypnotic, almost enough to lull me. But then I saw it. A flicker of light between the trees. A flashlight, moving. My breath caught. The beam weaved slowly, deliberately across the field, then stopped at the fence. Ash stirred in the barn, hooves shifting against the wood. The light lingered a moment longer, and then disappeared into the trees. I didn't move for a long time. By dawn, I'd made a decision. If someone was watching, I'd find them before they found me again. I packed a small bag, camera, flashlight, notepad, knife. I told myself it was just to feel safe, but really, I was chasing the truth. Ash followed me to the fence, ears forward, nostrils flaring as though he sensed what I was about to do. "I'll be back," I told him. He didn't move. For a second, I thought about turning around, about letting it go. But the thought of that flashlight in the dark made my skin crawl. So I went. The woods were still damp from the rain. Every step sank into soft earth. I followed the faint trail of footprints again, deeper this time, until the trees began to thin and the ground sloped upward. Then I saw it, a small wooden structure, half collapsed, hidden by vines and fog. A hunting blind. Or at least, that's what it used to be. Inside, I found scraps of paper, food wrappers, and something worse. A small, portable monitor. Its screen was black, but the cord was still connected to a battery pack. Someone had been sitting here, watching live. I pressed my hand to my mouth, trying to breathe, and then I saw the photo, pinned to the wooden wall, curled at the edges. It was me, standing by the fence, my hand on Ash's neck, eyes closed, a faint smile on my face. The same moment from the footage, except this one was printed, developed, and beneath it, written in neat, almost delicate handwriting, beautiful when she trusts. I stumbled back, heart hammering. My fingers went cold. The air outside felt too thin, the trees too close. Whoever had done this wasn't just watching. They knew me. They'd been close enough to see details no camera could catch, the warmth in my chest, the peace I'd begun to build here, cracked like glass. For the first time since I'd come to this place, I felt truly afraid. I ran. Branches tore at my coat. Mud splashed my legs, breath ragged in my throat. When the barn finally came into view, I almost sobbed in relief. Ash was waiting at the fence, head high, eyes sharp. "I found it," I gasped. "Someone's been living out there, watching." He snorted, pawing the ground. I rested my hands on the rail, trembling. "I don't know what they want, but I'm not running again." My voice broke a little on that last word, because I realized then, this place, this life I'd built, fragile and unfinished, was the first thing I didn't want to lose. And Ash. He was the only witness to everything I'd been trying to rebuild. I met his gaze, and something in the air shifted. Not fear this time, but resolve. "We stay," I said quietly. Together, Ash exhaled long and slow, and lowered his head toward me. Outside, the sun broke through the mist, scattering gold across the wet grass. For a moment, it felt like a promise. But deep inside, I knew. This wasn't over. Somewhere in those woods, someone was still watching, and they weren't done yet. The third morning came brittle and bright. Frost glazed the grass like a thin sheet of glass, and the sky stretched pale and cloudless, as if trying too hard to look innocent. I hadn't slept. My mind kept replaying that photograph, beautiful when she trusts. The handwriting haunted me, looping elegant and deliberate, the kind that belonged to someone who had taken their time. I burned it at sunrise. But even as the paper curled and blackened, I felt no relief, only the strange certainty that whoever had written those words already knew I'd destroy them. They were ahead of me. I poured coffee with shaking hands and watched Ash through the window. He stood near the far fence, still and alert, his breath steaming in the cold air. He'd been restless since yesterday. I could see it in the way his ears flicked at every sound, the way he'd pace, pause, and stare toward the woods as though waiting for something to emerge. So was I. By mid-morning, I decided to take action. If I couldn't find whoever was doing this, maybe I could make them reveal themselves. I grabbed one of the cameras, the less damaged one, and set it up on a post facing the pasture, this time under my control. "Let's see how you like being watched," I muttered. Ash followed me along the fence line, his heavy steps muffled by the frost. When I knelt to adjust the angle, he leaned his head close enough that his breath warmed the back of my neck. "I know," I said softly. "You don't like this any more than I do." He blew through his nostrils, a short huff that almost sounded like agreement. After setting the trap, I tried to return to normal, feeding him, cleaning the barn, pretending life hadn't split open at the seams. But the pretense felt thin. Every creak of the wood made me glance over my shoulder. Every rustle of leaves drew my eyes to the tree line. I'd moved here for silence. Now it felt like a weapon. Around noon, I took Ash out of the stall for a short walk along the pasture. His coat gleamed under the winter sun, and the rhythm of his hooves against the frozen ground steadied my pulse. Sometimes, when he moved beside me, I forgot about everything else. The fear, the past, the loneliness. His presence had a way of grounding me, of reminding me that I still existed in a body that could feel the world. When we reached the far end of the field, I noticed something odd, a small ribbon of red cloth tied around the fence post. I froze. It hadn't been there yesterday. I reached for it cautiously. The fabric was new, bright against the dull brown wood. When I untied it, a small folded note fell to the ground. My name was written on it, Ilara. Just that. No signature. My throat tightened. Whoever it was, they knew my name now. I shoved the note into my pocket and turned back toward the barn, forcing my steps to stay slow so Ash wouldn't spook. My heart, though, was galloping. Inside the barn, I shut the doors, leaned against them, and finally let my breath out. I wanted to believe it was some twisted prank, but deep down, I knew better. There was intention behind this. Observation, curiosity. Someone wanted to see how I'd react, and I had just given them what they wanted. That evening, I sat with my laptop again, reviewing the footage from the camera I'd set earlier. Hours of nothing. Wind, sunlight, shifting shadows. Then, at 3:17 p.m., the image flickered. A figure appeared at the edge of the woods, too far to make out clearly. A tall shape, wearing a hood or hat. The figure stood still, watching the pasture, Ash's head lifted in the frame, ears pricked forward. He saw them first. Then the figure lifted something. A hand, maybe a camera, and the feed went to static. When it cleared, the person was gone. I sat back, heart pounding, palms slick. It wasn't my imagination. Someone was there. The next day brought wind, sharp, relentless gusts that made the trees groan. The air smelled metallic, like rain waiting to fall. I tried to distract myself by mending a broken gate, but halfway through, I heard it. A faint whistle, not the wind, a tune, soft, wandering, just audible above the rustle of branches. I froze, every nerve on alert. The sound came from beyond the fence, the same stretch of woods where I'd found the red ribbon. Ash snorted. Tossing his head, muscles quivering, the whistle stopped. Silence again, heavy. Deliberate, I stepped closer to the fence, straining to see between the trees. Nothing. Then a voice, faint but clear enough to chill my blood. "He likes you." My breath caught. It was a man's voice, low, calm, too composed. "Who's there?" I shouted. No answer. Ash stamped the ground, tail lashing. I scanned the tree line. No movement, no color. Just shadows thickening as clouds rolled in. I wanted to run back to the house, but something inside me, stubborn, defiant, kept me rooted. "Show yourself." The woods said nothing, then slowly, the whistle began again, and this time, Ash reared, sudden, violent. Hooves cutting through the air, I stumbled backward, heart racing, barely keeping my footing as he came down, snorting and trembling. "Easy," I called, grabbing the rope at his halter, my own fear bleeding into the word. "Easy, boy." He calmed after a few seconds, still shaking, eyes fixed on the trees. But the whistle was gone. That night, I didn't even try to sleep. I sat on the porch with a flashlight and a thermos of coffee, scanning the darkness. The cold gnawed at my fingers, but I didn't care. I wanted him to know I was awake, that I wasn't afraid, even if that was a lie. Ash stayed close to the fence, moving restlessly. The moon hung low, white and thin, painting the world in silver. Somewhere, an owl cried. Hours passed. Then, near 2 a.m, a shadow crossed the edge of the field. I snapped the flashlight toward it. Nothing. But when I turned the beam back toward the barn, my heart stuttered. Because Ash wasn't there anymore. The gate stood open. I ran. The beam bounced wildly over the ground as I called his name. The cold air tore at my lungs. Ash! No answer. I followed the trail of hoofprints through the grass, past the creek, toward the woods. The prints were deep, frantic. He'd bolted hard. When I reached the tree line, I heard rustling ahead, then a sharp crack, a branch breaking. Ash! I broke through into the clearing where the old hunting blind stood. The flashlight swept across empty space, until it caught on a familiar shape. Ash stood there, trembling, eyes wide, breath steaming, and behind him, a figure, hooded. Still, I froze. "Don't," the man said quietly. His voice was the same one from the fence. "You'll scare him. What do you want?" He stepped closer, and the light caught his face, pale, lined, eyes a strange, unreadable gray. "Nothing you wouldn't want someone to see," he said. The words hit like ice water. I tightened my grip on the flashlight. "You've been filming me." He smiled faintly. "Not just you. The moment. The trust. You don't understand how rare it is. The way he looks at you." "Get off my property," I snapped. He tilted his head, almost sympathetic. "You think this place is yours? You think he is?" Before I could respond, Ash moved. A sudden lunge forward, cutting the space between us. The man stumbled back, tripped, and disappeared into the shadows. I grabbed the rope at Ash's halter, trying to steady him. My pulse was a drumbeat in my ears. When I looked again, the man was gone. Only the echo of his words lingered. "Beautiful when she trusts." By the time we made it back to the barn, dawn had started to bleed into the sky. I locked the gates, bolted the doors, then leaned against the wall. Shaking, Ash lowered his head beside me, his breath soft against my shoulder. "You saved me," I whispered. He blinked slowly, eyes calm again, as if none of it had happened. The warmth of him against the cold air felt like the only real thing left in the world. "I don't know who he is," I murmured, "but he's not done. I can feel it." Ash nickered quietly, a low, reassuring sound. For the first time, I realized the truth that both terrified and comforted me. I wasn't alone anymore, and that meant whoever was out there watching, they weren't just dealing with me, they were dealing with us. By the fourth day, the wind began to howl before dawn. It came rolling down from the hills like a living thing, low, moaning, full of warnings. I'd grown used to silence out here, to the still, fragile rhythm of solitude. But that morning the air felt charged, restless, the kind of pressure that settles on your skin before a storm breaks. Ash knew it too. When I stepped into the barn, he was pacing, head tossing, tail whipping at the air. The smell of rain was already seeping in through the cracks, sharp and electric. "Hey," I said softly, brushing his neck. "Easy, it's just weather." But I didn't believe it. After what had happened in the woods, I'd reported it. The sheriff's office sent a deputy, a tired-looking man who scanned the tree line, took my statement, and told me to keep the gates locked, ma'am. That was it. No patrol, no urgency. Out here, surrounded by miles of nothing, I might as well have been invisible. So I installed new locks, checked the windows twice a night, and tried to pretend I wasn't waiting for the man in the hood to return. But storms have a way of shaking everything loose. Not just branches and fences, but fear itself. By noon, the clouds were boiling black. I tried to secure the barn doors with heavy chains, but the wind kept wrenching them open. The horses' nerves were contagious. Ash's snorts echoed through the rafters, and the younger mare in the next stall kicked until her hooves sparked against the wood. All right, I murmured, stroking Ash's muzzle. "We're riding this one out together." Thunder cracked overhead, close enough to rattle the roof. For a moment, the lights flickered, and then went out. Darkness fell like a curtain. I grabbed a lantern from the wall and lit it. The flame swayed wildly, painting everything in trembling gold. Outside, rain began to hammer the roof, heavy as stones. The sound drowned out everything else, and even my own heartbeat. Then, beneath the roar, I heard something else. Tap, tap, tap. Not rain, knocking. At the barn door, I froze. The sound came again, slow, deliberate, impossible to mistake. Ash snorted. Jerking his head, muscles quivering, I raised the lantern higher. "Who's there?" "No answer. Go away," I shouted, louder this time. Silence. Then, tap, tap, tap. 3 more knocks. My throat tightened. I moved toward the door, each step louder than I intended. The wind shoved against the wood as though it wanted in. "Say something," I demanded. Still nothing. I hesitated, then lifted the latch just enough to peer through the crack. The rain was coming down in thick sheets, blurring everything into motion. But through the blur, I saw a shape, a figure standing motionless at the gate. He was there, even through the storm. I recognized the way he held himself, tall, steady, patient, waiting. I slammed the latch shut and backed away, heart hammering. Ash was wild now, hooves striking the floor, eyes rolling white. I ran to him, trying to calm him, but my hands were shaking too much. "It's okay, boy. He can't get in." Thunder shook the ground and Ash reared, slamming against the stall door. The wood creaked dangerously. I grabbed the halter, whispering to him, letting my voice fill the noise. "Stay with me, Ash, you hear me? Stay." The words seemed to reach him. His breathing slowed, the tremors easing beneath my hand. For a moment, we both just listened, to the storm, to the wind, to the pounding of our hearts. Then, faint and distant through the thunder, I heard something else. My name. Ilara. The sound threaded through the storm, so soft I might have imagined it. I turned toward the door again, every instinct screaming to stay away, but something stronger, curiosity, maybe defiance, pulled me forward. I lifted the latch. The door flew open on its own, the wind snatching it from my hands. Rain lashed my face. The gate at the far end of the field swung wildly, chains clanging against the post. But the figure was gone. Only footprints remained. Deep, fresh, vanishing into the flooded grass. I secured the doors again, drenched and shaking, and leaned against the wood until my legs steadied. The storm raged on, but something inside me went oddly still. Whoever he was, he wanted me afraid. But fear had a limit, and I'd reached mine. When the storm finally began to fade near midnight, I sat beside Ash's stall, wrapped in a blanket, lantern guttering low. The air was heavy with wet hay and ozone. Ash lowered his head to nudge my shoulder, and I smiled weakly. "You probably think I'm losing it," I murmured. He blinked slowly, the kind of calm that seemed older than the world. "You know, before I came here, I thought silence meant safety. But maybe it just means no one's left to hear you scream." The words came out before I could stop them. I hadn't spoken that truth aloud since the day I left the city. Left everything behind. But saying it felt like letting go of a weight I'd been carrying too long. Ash exhaled softly, as if agreeing. I reached up, running my fingers through his mane. "You were wild once. Maybe you still are. Maybe that's why you understand." Outside, the wind shifted, gentler now, a whisper instead of a howl. That's when I noticed something glinting on the ground near the door, a flash of metal. I stood, heart tightening again, and crossed the floor. It was a key, small, rusted, with a broken tag attached. The tag read, "Quinn Property, North Gate." My breath hitched. The North Gate hadn't been used in years. I hadn't even found the lock for it yet, until now. The rain had stopped, leaving the world drenched and shining. I slipped on my boots and stepped out into the night, lantern in hand. The storm clouds were breaking apart, revealing streaks of pale moonlight. The grass glittered like glass shards underfoot. Ash called once from the barn. A low, uncertain sound. "I'll be right back," I promised. He pawed the ground, but didn't follow. I made my way toward the north field, where the fence curved into the woods. The key felt cold in my hand, heavier than it should have been. The gate appeared out of the dark, tall, iron, half buried in weeds. It was locked, exactly as I'd last seen it. I crouched and fit the key into the rusted padlock. It turned easily, too easily. The gate creaked open. Beyond it was a narrow path I hadn't explored before, leading downhill through the trees. I hesitated only a second before following it. The trail wound between twisted oaks and stones slick with moss. The air smelled faintly of smoke, though the storm should have washed any scent away. At the bottom of the hill, the path opened into another clearing, smaller than the one with the hunting blind, but neater, more deliberate. Someone had built a makeshift shelter here. Canvas stretched between poles, a campfire pit, and beside it, stacks of photographs, hundreds of them. They were pegged to a string like clothes on a line, fluttering in the damp air. All of them were of me, feeding Ash, cleaning the barn. Standing by the fence, every moment I thought I'd spent alone. But one photo stopped me cold. It wasn't taken recently. It was from before. Years ago, me, younger, standing outside a downtown office building, hair shorter, smile tight and tired. Someone had been following me long before I ever came here. I picked it up with shaking hands, water dripping from my hair onto the paper. On the back, scrawled in the same looping handwriting, "You can't hide where you belong." A branch cracked behind me. I spun, raising the lantern. The man stood at the edge of the clearing, raincoat dripping, hood down this time. His face looked older than I'd remembered. Eyes sunken, expression oddly calm. "You knew my name before I moved here," I said. "How?" He stepped closer. "Because I sold this land to you." I blinked. "You're lying." He shook his head. "I built that barn with my brother. This was our family's place, until they died. Until you bought it. What do you want from me?" "Not you," he said quietly. "Him." He nodded toward the direction of the barn. "Ash? He's the last thing I had left," the man whispered. "And you took him," I swallowed hard. "He came to me," his voice cracked. "Because you called him. Because you needed saving." Lightning flickered again, lighting his face. Not rage now, but grief. "You can keep the land," he said softly. "But the horse comes back with me." "No." He tilted his head. "You think you can stop me?" I raised the lantern higher. "Try me." A sound cut through the trees, hooves pounding, fast and furious. Ash burst into the clearing like a storm reborn, mane flying, eyes wild. He charged straight between us, planting himself between me and the man, head lowered, muscles coiled. The man stumbled back, eyes wide. I reached for Ash's mane, steadying myself against him. His body was trembling but solid, unyielding. "You see," I said quietly, "he chooses where he belongs." For a long time, none of us moved. The wind hissed through the leaves, carrying the faint smell of smoke and rain. Then the man turned, shoulders slumping, and vanished into the woods. When I led Ash back through the north gate, dawn was beginning to break again, pale, cold, and clean. We stopped by the creek as the first light hit the water. I dropped to my knees, exhausted, and pressed my forehead against his neck. "You came for me," I whispered. Ash shifted, resting his head gently against my back. I laughed, shaky, wet, half hysterical. "Guess we both saved each other, huh?" The wind rustled through the grass, softer now, carrying the scent of new rain and the faintest hint of peace. But deep inside, I knew the story wasn't finished. The man's words echoed in my head. You called him. And part of me couldn't stop wondering if maybe, somehow, that was true. The morning after the storm was quieter than any I had known. The air was sharp, clean, carrying the faint scent of wet grass and distant pine. Mist lingered over the valley, curling around the fence posts and creeping through the trees like smoke. It was almost magical, and almost dangerous. Ash had stayed close to me all night, muscles relaxed but alert, every step a steady rhythm against the frozen earth. I could feel his heartbeat beneath my palm as I stroked his neck. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel completely alone, but the shadow of the man in the woods still lingered. He hadn't returned, not since the confrontation by the north gate. That didn't mean he wouldn't. I spent the morning inspecting the property, checking the gates and making sure the cameras were in place. The footage from the night before showed the storm's chaos, falling branches, whipping rain, but no sign of him. I wondered if he'd ever truly planned to take Ash, or if his intrusion had been a desperate attempt to claim something he'd lost long ago. The past had a way of twisting itself into the present. By afternoon, I was walking the ridge beyond the barn, Ash trotting beside me. The valley stretched out below, flooded with sunlight breaking through the dissipating clouds. I stopped at the edge of the hill, staring down at the creek that cut through the field. My reflection rippled in the water, framed by mist and frost. "You're safe," I whispered to Ash, though I wasn't sure if I meant him or myself. He nudged my shoulder, steady and reassuring, and I laughed softly. That laugh had been missing for too long, replaced by tension and fear. The sense of unease returned when I noticed movement along the tree line. A figure, familiar and silent, watching again. I stiffened, instinct screaming, but this time something was different. The man didn't step forward, didn't hide. He simply stood, head lowered slightly, like he was waiting for permission. I raised my hand toward him. He mirrored me with a slow, deliberate nod. I took a deep breath. "Why are you here?" I called. My voice was steadier than I expected. His eyes, gray and tired, met mine. I had to see if he was okay, I repeated, disbelief lacing my tone. "You saved him," he said quietly. "You didn't know it, but you saved him." Ash stamped the ground, shifting uneasily between us. I felt his body tense. "He was all I had left," the man continued. "And I thought if I could get him back, maybe I could fix the past." I exhaled slowly, letting the tension leak from my shoulders. "You can't fix the past by taking what isn't yours." He looked down at the grass, shadows playing across his face. "I know that now." The sun broke through a cloud, striking the valley with a golden beam. In that light, the man looked smaller somehow. Human. Vulnerable, not a threat. I took a careful step toward him, Ash at my side. "It's over," I said. He nodded again, and for the first time I sensed honesty in his movements. "It is," he admitted. I needed to see he was safe, that you were worthy of him." I blinked. "Worthy of him?" Ash pressed his nose against my shoulder, warm and steady, grounding me. "Sometimes," the man continued, "love isn't about possession. It's about trust. He chose you, and that's enough." I stayed silent, absorbing the words, feeling their weight. For years I'd believed that running away meant I was weak, that choosing solitude over confrontation meant failure. But here, on this hill, with Ash at my side and the sunlight glinting off the frost, I realized I hadn't run. I had come home. The man straightened slowly. "I'll go," he said. "You deserve this, both of you." I watched him move back toward the trees. Every step was deliberate, leaving no trace, like a shadow dissolving in the morning light. Before disappearing entirely, he turned. "Take care of him," he said. I nodded, unable to find words. Ash snorted softly, stepping closer to me. His dark eyes were steady and unwavering. "You chose me too," I whispered. "You didn't have to, but you did." He lowered his head, brushing my hand with his muzzle. The days that followed were quiet, almost painfully so. The cameras remained, but they felt like relics, reminders of what had passed rather than warnings of what was to come. I repaired the barn doors properly, reinforced the gates, and even cleared the Northfield path. Yet every time I walked past the edge of the woods, I felt the echo of those footsteps, the faint memory of the whistle, the sharp edge of fear. But fear no longer controlled me. Alara Quinn, the woman who once ran from life, had learned something crucial. Trust, once earned, could become a shield. And Ash, the horse who had appeared like a ghost in the mist, had become the bridge between who I was and who I could be. We worked together, morning to night, clearing pastures, fixing fences, tending to the small injuries of the animals, and through it all, a quiet rhythm emerged, one that didn't rely on solitude nor on fear, but on companionship and understanding. One evening, I rode Ash to the ridge overlooking the valley. The sun was setting, turning the mist into ribbons of amber and violet. I breathed deeply, letting the cold wind fill my lungs. "You know," I said softly, "I thought I needed to disappear to be safe, but the truth is I just needed someone to trust me enough to stay." Ash snorted softly, shifting his weight, his presence a warm constant against the fading light. A gentle peace settled over me. From the ridge, I could see the far reaches of my property. The barn gleamed in the last light of day, the creek shimmered like silver, and the hills rolled gently toward the horizon. I thought of the man, the one who had haunted the edges of my life for days, and I realized something. He wasn't a villain. Not entirely. He was broken, grieving, lost in his own history, and yet, by trusting me, by allowing Ash to choose, he had let go. I had learned the same lesson in return. Ash shifted under me, ears twitching, eyes following the ridgeline where the last light of the sun lingered. "Let's go home," I said. We rode down together, the wind carrying our movement, and for the first time in years, I felt the certainty of belonging. Not to a house, not to a job, not to anything I had once clung to. I belonged here, with him, and this land, this fragile, breathing, untamed valley belonged to us. Night fell, and stars blanketed the sky. The camera lights blinked softly, unnoticed, recording nothing remarkable anymore. The man would not return. Ash and I were safe. I stood in the barn doorway, brushing his mane with gentle, deliberate movements. "You're more than a horse," I said. "You're my mirror, my guide, and maybe the only reason I didn't give up." He nuzzled my shoulder, and the warmth of that simple gesture was enough. Outside, the wind rustled gently through the grass, carrying a promise I hadn't dared hope for. Life continues, even after storms, even after shadows, even after fear. And in that moment, I knew it. The valley, the barn, the horse, and we were exactly where we were meant to be. As I turned to leave, Ash followed, steady and sure. The ridge lay behind us, the storm behind us, and the horizon, bright and open, ahead. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone, and the world for now was exactly right.